My guest today on the Science Studio is A C Grayling, Professor of Philosophy at Birkbeck College, University of London. Anthony Grayling is in town for Beyond Belief, the third annual Beyond Belief meeting, and we're at the Salk Institute. Anthony, welcome. You are the author of so many books, I don't even know where to start, but the last one I notice was called Against All Gods, 6 polemics on religion and an essay on kindness, which you put in at the end there. Many pieces about you start with things like lion-maned philosopher A C Grayling isn't afraid to leave his ivory tower to dispense his own brand of bracing moral advice. You're seen as something of a public intellectual. You're known to be an atheist, and you often say things that would be considered unkind about religion. Is that unfair, or is that a fairly...
Perfectly fair, yeah.
Now, how did you get to be this, this scourge of religion at this point?
Well, in our contemporary world, and especially I think since 9/11, there's been a sort of jacking up of the temperature in the debate between people who have a religious orientation and people who don't. In my own country, in the United Kingdom, 10, 20 years ago, people didn't really talk about these things very much. If they had a religious commitment of some kind, they kept it quiet. If they didn't, they kept it quiet. And if you came across somebody who was a regular churchgoer and had views that were deeply informed by their religious commitment, you sort of bypassed it a little bit. Religion was a bit like sex. It was something for your private life. And good taste on the whole prevailed. But the catalyst, I think, was the eruption into international affairs and national affairs of religiously motivated violence. And it annoyed a lot of people on both sides. It annoyed people who didn't want to see religion getting back into the discussion in the wrong kind of way. And it annoyed people of religion who didn't want to be branded by their adversaries, as being all terrorists and all aggressive. So the quarrel has turned out to be a rather bad-tempered one. It seemed to me very important that one should distinguish 3 things. One was the metaphysical question about whether or not there are supernatural entities or agencies in this universe of ours. The other is the question of secularism, which religiously motivated people might sign up for, the idea of just keeping politics and religious questions separate, at least in the sense that people of religious commitment see themselves as one among a number of civil society voices with a point of view and an entitlement to put it, but not a dominating voice in the public domain. And then the third question, and this is the one that really does interest me, is the question of the ethical basis of society. And it seemed to me that in the small h sense of humanism, there is a very powerful, rich humanist tradition in Western civilization, a very ancient one, in fact older than Christianity and Islam, which is now a Western religion too, and that it was very important to stake the claim for that, to make people aware of the fact that they were missing a large part of the debate if they didn't talk about that too. So I sometimes attack people on the secularist side of things if their religious views make them want to push too far forward into the public domain. But really the most interesting thing for me is the humanist aspect.
Now, the other of your books I have here is actually, the title is What is Good? The Search for the Best Way to Live. I know that was taught as a philosophy text at UC San Diego recently as well. So that's probably something that you're quite proud of as a text, and that perhaps represents more fully the views that you want to espouse, right?
It was an attempt to explain these 2 main traditions of thought in the Western tradition. On the one hand, the view that the basis for our thinking about the human good has to be premised on our best understanding of human nature and the human condition. And this was something that was explored in classical antiquity and has been a theme all the way through. And the other is I suppose you might, if you were being especially unkind, call it an Oriental view, which has burst into the Western tradition early on in the form of the Judeo-Christian tradition, which says that the source of good is something transcendent. It comes from outside this world and it's imposed on us. A demand is made on us to struggle with our own human condition in ways that somebody who doesn't share that view would regard as somewhat unnatural. But these 2 views, the idea that morality exists because there's a command from outside the world on us to think, act, and be in a certain way, and the other which says that we must seek and make our own good on our best understanding of ourselves. So the book is an attempt to try to describe those 2 traditions and the conflict between them, the debate between them, and sometimes the hostility between them.
Let's go back a little bit and see how you came to be a philosopher. I mean, and how does one get to be a philosopher? Where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Central Africa. My parents are British, but they were working and living abroad, right bang in the middle of Africa in what is now Zambia, on the border of the Belgian Congo.
So that used to be Rhodesia?
It used to be northern Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe. And then we lived in Nyasaland, which is a very beautiful part of Africa. And I've had occasion to say before now that the two main entertainments that people had, adults anyway, were adultery and golf. And for somebody like me without television and not much else to do, reading. so quite early on I got interested in what was in the encyclopedia and read about Socrates and all these great people and thought that's absolutely wonderful. And then when I was about 12, I went into our little local library, which is a very eccentric little library. It consisted of all the books that were left behind by British expats who had died of tropical diseases and had taken with them the books they'd read at university not very many years before. And so there was a complete set of Plato's dialogues. And I picked out the first one. This is age 12, remember. Picked out the very first one, which happened to have the very early and very accessible dialogues of Plato. The first one I read was the Charmides, which is about temperance. And I was bowled over by it. I thought, this is absolutely wonderful. Here's this great man, Socrates, grown up, giving us permission to contemplate temperance. And then the other ones were all about justice and goodness and beauty, and it seemed to me that was something worth devoting one's life to.
Your parents had no scientific or philosophical background. Your father was a businessman?
Yeah, my father was a banker.
Yeah.
And my mother, a complainer. She didn't like Africa at all. And she used to look at the airmail edition of the Times and say, look what we're missing on the West End stage. But the thing is that she didn't really want to go back to the UK because in Africa you had this very, very comfortable life with lots of servants and good weather. And so her complaining was really an exercise, an entertainment, I suppose.
No. So, but at some point you obviously went to England and for an education, right?
Yes. I went back as a teenager to be educated there, university, and by that time already it was settled really that the thing to do was to study philosophy, not only because of the intrinsic interest of philosophical debates and really wanting to understand more about what was involved, but also because it was quite clear to me, even at that early age, that philosophy gives you a license to stick your nose into everything. So it was a kind of carte blanche, really, for being interested in everything that human beings do. Because it also seemed to me early on that all the things that we try to do, all our endeavours, whether they're in the sciences, in the humanities, and social sciences, in the arts, they're all part of the same great enterprise, which is to try to understand this world of ours and ourselves in it. And they are all the special pursuits, really, are attempts to push the horizon of our ignorance a little bit further away, and that philosophy has a duty to some extent to patrol that horizon as a whole and to interfere or comment or make suggestions, participate in the conversation that people are having about their special pursuits. And so, as a really exciting, exhilarating invitation to be involved in that conversation, philosophy seems to be the right way.
But you keep up with science, don't you? Because you write a column for New Scientist, for example. Obviously, how would you describe the relationship between philosophy and science now, especially in neurosciences, with the neurosciences?
Well, firstly, I should say that I'm a very enthusiastic amateur of science in both senses of the term amateur. That is, a lover of what happens in the sciences, which I think constitute jointly a magnificent adventure, thrilling. I mean, all we have to do is just to think of all the anticipation and excitement which is built up around the Large Hadron Collider in CERN. I think we all expected that there would be teething problems, but what that's going to deliver is immense if all the promises are borne out. I think what's happening in the biological sciences in the last decade, 2 decades, and the promise that they hold out, again, that's absolutely extraordinary. And there's something so powerful and beautiful about what science reveals about the universe that it's really staggering when you meet people who are unaware of it or uninterested in it in some way.